£4 just for a fucking thumbnail. One thing I have never really spoken about is my hatred to going to public events, because I hate the general public. Why do you think they keep me locked away in the kitchen? I hate going to the cinema because I can't stand people talking over the movie. I hate going to live music events because I can't stand people who can't handle their alcohol. And I hate going to football matches because I'm not really interested in watching 22 in their prime, top of the tier athletes being told how to do their job by 40,000 divorced, overweight, borderline alcoholic, receding hairline, middle-aged men. Yes, I realise I do actually fit into that category as well, but the difference between me and those 40,000 wankers is I actually know who my real dad is. The world of sport, particularly football, is rife with arseholes. If you look at all the death threats that David Beckham had for years, and even to the modern day where you still have the extreme racism and anti-Semitism that is flooding the Italian and Spanish leagues. One sport I never associated with rowdy fans was basketball. And yes, I'm sure if you take a passionate fan and then you make them American, they could be annoyingly obnoxious. But I never thought that they could push a player far enough into an all-out brawl. And on November the 19th, 2004, that's exactly what we got. The 2004 Detroit Pistons versus the Indiana Pacers at the Palace at Auburn Hills, now known as the Malice at the Palace. To give you an idea of how this incident happened, we need to travel back to the beginning of the 2000 NBA season and the trades that were taking place to bring new players in to the Indiana Pacers. The Indiana Pacers had just brought in some young red-hot talent to be led at the front by NBA legend Reggie Miller, and after losing out on the final the summer before, the Pacers were desperate to get another shot. The first of these two most notable new signings would be Jermaine O'Neal, an incredible young talent who had all the strengths of a larger player and all the nimbleness of a smaller player. Over the course of the next couple of seasons, O'Neal would become the face of the Pacers' future. The second of the two most notable is Ron Artest, who joined in 2002. And Reggie Miller himself has said after Ron Artest's first training session with the guys that Jermaine O'Neal actually come up to them and said, "I don't think we've ever trained this hard before." To which Reggie Miller agreed. Things were looking solid for the Pacers. Artest was described as being a phenomenally hard worker and a great defensive player, making him formidable to play against. And when you mix this with his passion for the team, he could be very, very amped up. Artest always gave 100% on the court and wouldn't back down from anyone, leading often to some altercations and the occasional scuffle here or there, the kind of Sergio Ramos of the Pacers team. Artest has said himself multiple times that he didn't really like people and that he always had a chip. There was many post-match interviews with peers of the sport and they either all agreed or all parroted that he needed to keep it under control because he was considered himself to be a loose cannon. All of that aside, Artest would let his actions speak louder than words, and with the experience of Miller and the young raw talent of O'Neal, the Pacers were looking like championship contenders. O'Neal was referred to as a loose cannon too, but he just seemed to have it more under control than Artest did. But even he has agreed that he has the same hard-nosed, gritty mentality that Artest does. The Pacers had the best record in the league that year, making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they would come up against the Detroit Pistons. But this is not the match in question. This was just a sparring session. The Pistons and the Pacers faced off, and with 4 minutes remaining of the last quarter, they were tied at 59-59. And then it happened. Artest caught Detroit's Hamilton in the face with a forearm. In this sport, that is referred to as a flagrant foul. Why? Don't really know, but this is America. This is the same country that can't even say aluminium properly. This flagrant foul gave Detroit the advantage, and they ended up winning 69-65, going on to win the championship that year, leaving the Pacers behind. This was devastating to all at the team, and Artest took it the hardest, falling into deep depression and anxiety, and even wanting to retire from the sport. After that, it became a weekly occurrence that Artest was either trying to take some time off or not show up at all. His teammates were aware that he was in therapy, but unaware of his actual diagnosis. At the beginning of the new season, friction was starting to build, particularly between Artest and O'Neal, and as much as Miller tried to give guidance to the younger players, it wasn't really working, so some glue was needed to bring the cracks all together. In steps Steven Jackson, another young crazy dude. And it worked. It worked. Jackson has said himself for the first few days in the changing room, he knew Artest was a little off, but he didn't judge it for it because he himself was a little bit weird and smoked weed every day. Jackson was referred to as being down for the cause. His loyalty to the win and his teammates was the missing piece from the team last year. This year, the championship was going to be theirs. In the run-up to the championship, however, they were going to have to pass through one location. The Palace at Auburn Hills, the home of the Detroit Pistons. At this point in the season, the Indiana Pacers were already at 7-2, so when it came to their visit at the Palace, this was a statement match for them. They could finally put the defeat behind them and crack on towards the championship. And they absolutely wiped the floor with the Pistons. Pre-game, the crowd was charged. It was being broadcast on live TV and the atmosphere was electrifying. There is one small side note that I should get into first that involves one Pistons fan by the name of Charlie Haddad, who after the match was going to have his season ticket revoked from him for prior disturbances and generally being a bit of an arsehole. Just remember that. With just over 2 minutes of the final quarter remaining and the Pacers winning by a comfortable 15 points, number 11 of the Pacers, Jamal Tinsley, says to Ron Artest, "You can get your foul now." I have some unhinged friends. I would never give him that opportunity. Steven Jackson has even said himself, and I quote, "Why would you say that to Ron? He doesn't need a battery in his back to do something crazy." So with the home team already being humiliated, Pistons player Ben Wallace goes for a layup and Artest pushes him in the back mid-air. Now, I don't know much about the sport itself, but I know that that is a little bit faux pas and unsportsmanlike. Artest did cross the line and Wallace reacted. Now, Ron Artest is a big motherfucker that I am never fucking with, but Ben Wallace is even bigger, and the push on Artest made him go at least 16 feet, but not knocking him over completely. Seeing that Artest was still standing, Wallace went over to confront him with some of his teammates, causing a small brawl on the sideline next to the scorer's table. No actual punches were thrown, as both members of the team came in to try and be peacemakers. You know, pushing, shoving, yelling, finger pointing, the usual kind of stuff that you get in a sports brawl. Now, during all this, Artest knows that his teammates have got his back, and as he doesn't deal well with high emotional situations, he tries to calm himself down by lying on the scorer's table and counting to 5. This is actually a technique you can use to try and reduce your anxiety, but to anyone who is unaware of your condition, particularly in a sports moment like this, lying down and just taking a moment to relax when there is a brawl going on which you've started is just seen as disrespectful. With Artest lying down and the crowd amped up, it happened. Pistons fan and absolute tool John Green decides to throw a cup of beer, hitting Artest in the chest. After that, a herd of wild fucking horses couldn't have held Ron back. He proceeded to vault 2 sets of officials' tables and 3 rows into the crowd, unfortunately not identifying the correct person and going after the person next to John Green. As a couple more fans tried to swarm over Artest, Jackson kicked into high gear, his loyalty to his teammate, and he jumped up into the crowd. The two of them punching and just yeeting people out the way. The initial brawl lasted about a minute, with Artest finally being brought back onto the court, where he was confronted by the pre-aforementioned Charlie Haddad, who was going to have his season ticket removed, who decided to come out onto the court and confront him. What do you think happened? It was a quick punch by Artest, but nothing major, and a small scuffle did break out, but by this point more fans were coming onto the court. But now what I'm about to talk to you about is quite possibly one of my favourite moments ever captured on live TV. I don't advocate violence, by the way. After Artest was pulled away from that second scuffle, Charlie Haddad was brought back to his feet, only for Jermaine O'Neal to come in like a fucking wrecking ball and just... Haddad has claimed that O'Neal sucker punched him and that it was a bitch move. Irony. 2 main reasons. 1. If you cannot see the 6'4" black dude running at you across the basketball court, you are either lying or you cannot handle your alcohol. And 2, if O'Neil hadn't slipped just before connection, your bitch ass would have been knocked 6 feet under. It was a bitch move, says the failed wannabe alpha. More fans had gotten onto the court, so it was time to get the Pacers players off. And the fans up in the stands knew this. So they all swarmed to the corner of the away team's tunnel. If you see the footage, it's like the fucking Walking Dead. Just this herd just trying to get to these players. Artest, Jackson and Reggie Miller, who was unavailable to play due to an injury, were the first to get out of there. And the crowd are throwing everything at them. Some of them can even be seen pausing and waiting just so they've got a clearer shot at their target. O'Neil was one of the last ones to get to the tunnel, and by this point the crowd was so out of control that they were actually taking apart the stadium, with one fan taking a chair and throwing it in his direction, not knowing who it's going to hit. And it did hit an innocent bystander. Fortunately, all the Pacers got back to the locker room and no one was actually killed. And that ends what became known as Malice at the Palace. But what happened after that? Artest was banned for the rest of the season. Jackson was banned for 30 games. And O'Neil was banned for 15 games after originally being given 25. And not one dickless journalist or sports professional within the NBA pointed a finger at the fans. It was all the Pacers' fault. And Jackson, Artest and O'Neil were just thugs. No one within the NBA wanted to point a finger at the fans because their ticket sales were the ones that paid the bills essentially. So it was on the Pacers to take it on the chin. And they didn't want to bring the sport, the NBA, down. But that was only, however, their view. But when it came to the law, it was all open and things had to be looked at evenly. Step in Oakland County Prosecutor David Goitia. Don't know if I pronounced that right, don't care to find out. But we're here to look at the facts and not just to make an example out of these players. You'll be happy to know that after all the CCTV footage was looked at, that John Green, the thrower of the first beer, was identified. And when he was asked on TV by a reporter if he felt any guilt that Artest misidentified him and went for the person next to him, John Green just said, "I wish I'd stuck my foot out, that's all that I regret not doing." That, Charlie Haddad, is what you call a bitch move. Speaking of Charlie Haddad, he still takes no accountability for his actions, even though he was videoed voluntarily going onto the court, voluntarily approaching Artest and voluntarily making a fist in his hand from multiple camera angles. He says to this day that the Pistons have lost a loyal fan after having his season ticket revoked and also having a stadium lifelong ban, along with John Green as well. So what do I make of all this? Let's start with Ron Artest, and his actions are unprofessional, and at no point, no matter how provoked you are, should you professionally not go up into the stands to confront the fan. His actions cost the Pacers the championship that year, and Reggie Miller as well, who my heart goes out to the most. However, Artest, as someone who has also suffered with anxiety and depression and has also been provoked until the point of where you snap and people play the victim, I 100% fucking support you. Jermaine O'Neal and Steven Jackson, you are two of my favourite fucking people on the planet right now, and if we're ever going to find a cure for the low testosterone going around in humanity at the moment, we're going to be extracting it from your balls, I swear to God. My God, if I ever wanted two people to have my back, it would be you. As for the Pistons fans, let's not tarnish them all with the same brush. But the few select of you, you know who you are, the ones who surrounded the corner when the players were trying to get to the tunnel, or Charlie Haddad, or John Green. You are the walking definitions of beta males. You are the walking definition of wannabe failed chads who have severe victim complex. And if this video ever finds its way to you, please write whatever you want in the comments. Do it from the safety of your phone or computer. But this has been me, Pembroke's Own. Thank you all very much for watching. If you're new here, please subscribe. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a cheeky like. I would be trying to get back to some more Beyond Fiction because I know some of you really enjoy this. If you want to see anything particular in the Beyond Fiction series, let me know. If you want to see anything in the Writing Things series, let me know. If you've got a question for my Q&A, let me know. Much love. Take care. Peace.